Informational meeting to order. This is that is an echo. Yeah, is there a way to? I don't think it's the speaker, it's off the computer itself, it's off the owl. Can you mute? There we go. All right, there we go. Okay. So tonight, the warning is for other business, which is to be conducted this evening, which is not to vote on any budget, but to actually do a presentation in advance of the Australian ballot vote that will be taking place next Tuesday. So what we will be doing is introductions. You will see a presentation on the updated budget, which has been adjusted since the last informational meeting. And then we will, I will be facilitating questions from the audience to be able to answer questions about the budget in anticipation of the vote on Tuesday. We will be doing questions from folks who are here and present. We will then, in as organized a way as possible, taking questions from folks who are joining us via Zoom, and they will be raising their hand if they have a pressing question that has not been asked already. Unlike the last informational meeting, we have microphones both for those who are at home and for us here, which is a big plus. So we will be handing around the microphones to try to make that. We have two, and we will do our best, but this is a big improvement. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Nikki to start introductions, and I would like everyone to introduce themselves. One other point that I just want to make, we're going to limit the questions and conversation to folks who are residents. I will ask people to identify themselves, and without objection, the exception to that will be folks who are on the school staff, since they will be critical to both presenting as well as answering questions around the details, if that works for everyone. Good. Okay. So I will, here, you can take that one. And, well, yeah.
Hello. I'm Nikki Buck, and clearly I'm a resident of Hartland, and I am chair of the Hartland board.
Beth Roy, and I've been on the board for around 8 years.
Ryan Pezanowski, I am the newly elected school board member.
Lindsay Perkins, a principal at Hartland Elementary School. Christine Bourne, superintendent at Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union.
Hi, I'm Hannah Ben-Simone, and another member of the board. I've been a member of the board for a year.
Great. So we will.
Alina Martez, assistant principal at Hartland Elementary.
And master of. So we'll be turning it over to. Let's see, I can. Sure. Do we have them up? Okay. So Article 1, which is to transact any other business which may properly come before the meeting. And Article 2, shall the voters of the Hartland School District authorize the Hartland Board of School Directors to withdraw up to $10,000 from the Capital Reserve Fund for safety stopgaps for the existing Hartland Elementary School playground and for small outdoor play items as needed, which will be voted on by Australian ballot. Article 3, shall the voters of the Hartland School District approve the school board to expend $11,040,567, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year, also by Australian ballot on Tuesday. And that is, those are the three articles.
Thank you.
So Lindsay Perkins is going to present.
You're okay with this, Mike? Oh, okay. Some of this, for those that were here about a month ago, some of these will look familiar. We added some additional pieces to this presentation. So we wanted to start with some of our priorities. And then Alina, if you want to go to the next slide. We, as a supervisory union, have a strategic plan with 3 large main goals. The first one being student success and engagement, and we wanted to take a moment and outline what we are currently doing to work on and meet those goals. We do monthly heart awards to students that are demonstrating different aspects that teachers are seeing throughout their classrooms daily. We have a morning daily news, and last month we had a video from our librarian, Tina Skihan, who every day works with students to broadcast the news for everyone across the building. We have electives for our middle school students, 6th through 8th grade, where they have an opportunity to choose an area of interest of them throughout the day. We are currently implementing 2 programs throughout the building. The first is Amplify CKLA, which is a reading and writing curriculum that emphasizes other aspects like science and social studies as well. That is grades K through 5. This is our first year fully implementing that program in the building. And additionally, we K through 8, so our entire student population is using Eureka Squared, which is a math program that we piloted. We've had in place in the supervisory union, but there's been an updated version that our building has and the supervisory union has adopted for this current school year. The second strategic plan goal is around information and communication. And the way we work on and meet those goals is we have a weekly newsletter that we call the Wildcat Weekly that goes out every Friday to families. We have a Class Dojo account for any family member or grown-up involved in a student's caregiving that wants to participate. It's oftentimes, it can be at a classroom level where the teacher's uploading photos and updates. It can be at a whole school level where I send updates and photos of what students are doing throughout the building. We have Title I events. We have one that you'll see some pictures of. The picture on the right-hand side and the picture on the left-hand side are from our Camp Read A Lot that I touched on a little bit last month that was really targeted towards our students in grades K through 3 of those foundational reading skills and how critical those are for successful students as they grow older. And additionally on that night, we targeted some work with parents and families too around what they can do at home, recognizing that learning for a student is a partnership, absolutely. And we work really hard at creating fun and engaging family events. And sometimes that is the Title I sponsored events. Sometimes that's a community dinner. Sometimes that's just inviting families to come in. 2 times a year, we'll do lunch with a loved one. We'll do it in November, and we've done it in February, where we've had a fantastic turnout of grown-ups who have come to support their student or a student that they care for, which has been a wonderful, positive experience. The third strategic plan goal is around culture and student wellness. And the way we work on that is through winter activities that wrapped up in February, where all students throughout our school, the board has graciously kept the funding in to allow students to choose the winter activity that suits them best regardless of income for a student. So if a student would like to ski, that is an option that they have available. If a student would like to bowl, that is an option available for them. The third off-campus one that we do is swimming up at, UVAC, thank you, up at UVAC. Then there's also a number of opportunities inside the building if students choose to do that as well. 2 times a month, we do a Wildcat wrap-up where we have the entire student population as well as all of the grown-ups in the building together. We'll do fun activities, play some music, do some dancing, and just have a really good time as a whole school community. I mentioned before, we also do lunch with a loved one, which I touched on a moment ago, 2 times a year. We have some fantastic music concerts. We have 2 truly gifted and incredible music educators in our building who are really bringing just an amazing musical experience for all of the students, kindergarten through 8th grade at Hartland. And we just this past weekend put on an absolutely incredible play of SpongeBob the Musical. If anyone was able to make it, it was a really, really fantastically well done production, largely done by students, which makes it even better. Okay. And the last time there were some questions around some academic data, so we wanted to bring that as well. And what this will show you is there's 2 slides. This is the first one is around reading. The second one is going to be around math. This is showing growth. So the first graph on the left, you're going to see scores for the fall. The second on the right is the winter. So we do this a few times a year. This is the first year as an entire school building that we've implemented this assessment. It's called STAR assessment. The company is called Renaissance, who puts on the assessment. What you'll see is the red and what kind of looks a little orange, but red and yellow is those students significantly below or below. The blue and the green is meets or above. So the ultimate goal is to have fewer percentage in red and yellow and a higher percentage in blue and green. So what you'll see in the fall, if you specifically really look at the red from the fall to the winter, you'll see some positive growth in that there's a smaller number in the red than there was in the fall. And what we've done to be able to do that is really target standards and trends that we see with individual students, small groups of students, and whole classes, targeting those standards and really honing in on the instruction that we're doing, knowing that all students that we need to improve. At this point, we don't have state level data. Last year was the first year that we took what is called the VT cap, but those by the state are still embargoed, so they're not able to be shared publicly at this time. So that's why we wanted to keep it at the STAR. Yes, Nikki.
I just want to comment that some of the reasons that the data is not available is dysfunction. For those of us on boards and for educators. So.
Oh, you did, thank you. And you'll see a similar graph for math, where it's the same color system. So you're gonna see the red and the yellow as significantly below or below, and you'll see the blue and green as meets or above. So again, the ultimate goal, similarly in math as we're doing in reading, is honing in on what are the trends, individual, small group, whole class. When we look at these assessments, are there certain standards? Are there certain pockets of standards that we notice students are struggling with? And how do we target our instruction so we see improvement, that being the ultimate goal? Okay. All right, and how do we work within our community? And you'll see some of these pictures around here are winter activities, some of our lunch with a loved one and community dinners, as well as our all-school meetings. How do we work on meeting the needs of all students? We have special education services for those that qualify. We are HOPE clinicians and school counselors to help those social emotional needs that students have. We have algebra for 8th grade students that's housed at Windsor High School. And at the state level, we have free meals for all students. And what's new this year, we have a new student rep on the board, West Lee Ogilvy, who has been a great voice for all of us, both as staff and the board, is really giving a fresh, current perspective for what's going on in the building from a student lens. And the other thing we've been really thinking and targeting is having engaging Title I events where we invite families. I'm blanking on the one thank you. The Camp Read a Lot was one of those, and you'll see the couple pictures there. We have another that's really geared towards some of our older students coming up at the end of April. So we're really trying to think about targeting our families and students in those Title I events.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming, some of you twice. It's great to have an audience here. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on what is going on at the supervisory union level. And some of this will seem redundant because we are a very collaborative supervisory union and trying to reach goals across the supervisory union. So at the SU level, we continue to work on creating effective and efficient systems to meet the needs of all students, and while also providing services necessary to run our facilities and our buildings. Our priority goal this year is one of our strategic plan goals. It's culture and student wellness, and it's a priority on purpose because we believe strongly in educating the whole child. because we know that students can't thrive unless all of their needs are being met. And those include their mental health, their physical health, their social emotional well-being, their food security. All those things need to be in place before kids can really learn. So we make it a priority to address those. You may have heard or seen on the news or read in the newspaper, we are in a mental health crisis in this country, especially in our adolescents. So we see that in our schools. We have many students struggling with mental health issues. They manifest themselves in many ways. It can be truancy, it can be disengagement, it can be a range of behavioral challenges that we face with students, from minor to very major, and including academic struggles, academic failures. And we work really hard to meet those needs across the supervisory union. And I'm really proud of that, but I will say the responsibility has been shifted onto the schools, and we accept it willingly, but it does tax our resources, and it taxes your pocketbooks, to be honest with you. It costs money to provide the services that we need to get kids ready to learn. So I just wanted to mention that to you all. This year, we hired a coordinator of diversity, equity, inclusion. Her name is Tracy Price, and she's quite incredible. With her help, we're working to ensure that all students are included, they're represented, they have a sense of belonging, and they can bring their full self to school every day. And that really does help with student wellness and culture in a building. When kids feel like they can be themselves and they feel like they belong, the culture is positive in the school. So that's one thing we're super proud of. The other goal that we've been diligently working on for the past couple of years is student success and engagement. And you heard Lindsay talk about some of the programs we've put in place for academic improvement, and we are hoping to see, well, we expect to see those scores that she showed you improve over the next couple of years with these new programs in place. We use the Leader in Me framework across the SU to increase student voice, student choice, and leadership. We have also been focusing on giving students some agency, because that engages them. Nobody really likes to be told what to do all the time, every day. So when we can get our kids involved in their learning and how they learn and what they learn, it makes it more impactful, relevant, and successful. I just want to, can you go to the next slide, Alina? Yeah, next slide. Nope, back up. Yeah, that one's fine. That one's fine. The other one just showed what we do, but I can explain it. Oftentimes we'll get asked how much of your local tax dollars go to the supervisory union and how much go to your local school district. So this chart shows you that pretty clearly. Roughly a little more than 75% of your tax dollars go to your local budget, and the rest go to the supervisory union, and it's divvied out for admin and operations. It's there's a special education, early childhood program. We house that at the SU level, and food services. So that's how it's divvied up. The next slide just shows it in a different way, which is out of $1, how much of each dollar goes to which of those places. So you can see your local budget is the majority, of course. Special education is a big part of that, and that is mandated by law, so we don't have a lot of control over the special ed funds. Admin and Ops is our business department, our curriculum department, DEI, human resources, myself, IT, transportation. That's all in admin and operations. And then our early childhood program takes a little bit of that, as well as food services, which the boards have. Everything is divided by equalized pupil across the SU, except food service is divvied up by the number of students in our schools that are eating lunch. So that seemed like the most reasonable way to do that. So that's a little bit about what's going on at the supervisory union.
All right, and the next part goes into some logistics on fiscal year 25. You can hit the next one, Alina. We'll talk about some student enrollment, budget cost changes, and the tax rates. Go ahead. We wanted to make sure to highlight student enrollment in grades K through 12 because as Hartland is a tuition town, we do still educate all students in grades K through 12. So we wanted to have some trends as the last 2 years. So this current year, we are at 399 students in grades K through 12. Go ahead. And high school tuition cost, there it is for the last few years. It's important to note that we send about 30% of our K-12 population are students in the high school grades 9 through 12, and that does take about approximately 30% of our budget. The difference in this particular year is approximately $398,671, and that is with the dollars that the school that a student chooses to go to, those districts or high schools send the dollar amount that we need to pay for them. And it's a difference of about 13.2%. So the budget goals that we have is that it's important to create and maintain a staffing plan that supports students intellectually, social, emotionally, as well as physically, as well as to put forth a budget that is responsible, that still meets educational quality standards, which we abbreviate EQS, Educational Quality Standards. We wanted to make sure that we noted in last year's budget, we did decrease our teaching staff by 1 full-time educator through retirement. So we wanted to make sure, knowing that there was going to be this potential budget cliff, with not knowing all of the challenges that we would see this current budget year, but trying to be mindful that it was going to be a challenge, we proactively last year did decrease the teaching staff by 1 full-time educator. And some of the large budget changes you'll see, the last few years we have had ESSER funds, which came from COVID that have paid for salaries of 2 classroom teachers within our building. So inside this budget now, those ESSER funds for schools have ended. So we have, in order to keep those 2 classroom teachers, their salaries are included in our local budget. They're not additional teachers. They've been in our schools for a number of years. But those funds did shift from ESSER to local funds. I wanted to make sure that we pointed out from the previous time that we were here a month ago until now, there were certain aspects that we did take out of the budget. And those included a playground. It included 2 full-time educators, and those were both currently unfilled positions, so they're not staff that were in the building. There was some furniture dollar amount that we took out, as well as lockers for some of our students. In total, with what we took out locally, as well as what the supervisory union board decided to cut from their budget, we have cut a total of $500,632 from where we were a month ago when we came. And Nikki, I'll turn it over to you.
Alina, you can go back to Lindsay's budget changes slides because I made a realization. So I'm going to go stand somewhere. So I realized as we were going through this that we did not specifically put together a slide that talks about the capital reserve fund requests that we've made. In the previous presentation I made to everybody, we told you guys that we currently have portions of the playground that are cautioned off with caution tape because they are broken and cannot be replaced. So we put the capital reserve request in. We estimated, because we had to make this budget within days of last meeting, you guys. So we put in a $10,000 capital reserve request to do what we needed to do to make the playground safe. And we don't know what that is. We put in a $10,000 request because if making the playground safe means removing the playground, then that's what we estimated that would cost. So that's what that request is for, and I hope you support that. We need to have it safer than it is right now. Okay, so now we can go to my slides. Thank you. I do always, this is a slide that Christine found for me. It summarizes how I feel about education. There's a lot going on. There's more going on in that building than you could possibly imagine. Lindsay and Alina deal with more in 1 hour with a smile on your face than you could ever imagine. They don't just sit in their offices. They're in classrooms, they're in buildings, they're helping students. They have students in their offices. They are doing just an amazing amount of work, and they do it all with a smile, which blows my mind. Just highlighting some of the things. In our current education, we really look at our students as partners, and that's a big thing that we need students to be partners, because students are going into careers where they don't know what the career is going to be. By the time these kids graduate from high school, the careers will have changed and they won't know what career they're going to go into. So these kids really need to know how to think on their feet in order to prepare these students to go off and have a functional life. And so we're really trying to make, rather than dictating to students what they learn, in today's school culture, and this is nationwide, this isn't just in Hartland, today's school culture is to make students independent thinkers, because they can find all of those numbers and everything, all those memorized facts that we all learned in school. They can find all that on the internet. They don't need to learn and memorize facts. They don't need to have a teacher stand there and talk at them. What they need to learn how to do is deal with all of that information that they have and make the best decision going forward. So that is really the new direction that most classrooms have moved in, is a collaborative model where students aren't learning as much content as they're learning what to do with content. Okay, so there's a lot of other stuff on that slide, but we're going to keep going. Thank you. Okay, so here we are. We approved our budget in January, mid-January, and then the state came out with the tax numbers, and then the state went crazy and they passed a new law that changed everybody's calculations. And so we came to you with the budget that we'd presented, that we wanted to have voted on at town meeting. And after the state changed all the rules, we decided to rescind our budget. And we didn't decide to rescind our budget and cut because we didn't think we didn't need those things. I think most of you would agree that a school needs a functioning playground. But maybe this is not the year that we're going to have a functioning playground. And, you know, same with one of the positions that we cut was a curriculum coach. We will be the only school in the supervisory union without a curriculum coach, which is the person that teaches our teachers how to implement the curriculum they're handed. So I say this, like the cuts that we made were not easy. They're not things that we don't need. They're things that we do need. But the legislature changed the law hoping that most schools would choose to cut their budgets, and that would decrease the tax rate throughout the state. Hartland was one of 8 schools that chose to rescind their budget, or 8 districts statewide that chose to rescind their budget. So the idea that if we all cut a little bit, then the tax rate would go down statewide didn't work out so well for us. I think there's hope that 30 budgets didn't pass, and that if they cut, then maybe the statewide tax rate will come down. And I say the statewide tax rate because we have a tax rate in Hartland, but that tax rate really is not tied to our school budget. It's a statewide funding system, but we vote on it locally. So here we rescinded the budget right after our meeting on the 27th of February. And then we got right back at it. Thankfully, we had a leap day in February to give us an extra day. And we made our new budget 3 days later. And so we reduced the budget by $500,632 by cutting the positions that we talked about and the playground. And we're now coming to you with a new budget of just over 11 million. We'll go farther into the presentation. We've cut what we can. So these are the same numbers and categories that you'll see. I do want to say this happens every year. You'll see in the fine print of the budget, the line by line, number by number changes. If you look at these sheets, Sometimes you'll see a big change and you'll be like, oh, the board didn't tell me about that change. They're trying to get something under the radar. What happens every year is the state changes the categories of where we have to put things. So look farther into that category or look somewhere else, and that money will probably show up. People notice things every year, and we usually have to go to our finance director and say, where is that coded now? And so when you're looking one year to the next, sometimes you have to look a couple lines down to see where it got coded in a different location. And that's not by our choice, that's mandated from Montpelier. Okay, so the big changes in the school budget is the biggest is in tuition. Statewide, the average increase in the last time I looked at the average increase in school budgets, it was 15%. Our tuition number is going up by 13%, so it's slightly less than the state average, but that is where we are. We're paying all these other high schools, and they're all raising their tuition at about the same rate. So that's how we got to that increase. The next increase is in our wages, and the wages are negotiated at the supervisory union level. They're not negotiated within Hartland. They're also negotiated in a way that we can keep teachers on staff and not have them leave. It's really hard to train new teachers. It takes a few years, and we want teachers to remain on staff. Going through increases again, the next is the assessments, and that's the supervisory union assessment, and that is primarily our special education costs, and then other additional costs in there. And I will also say, when we rescinded the budget at the SU level as well, and we cut positions at the supervisory union level. Again, positions that we desperately need, but maybe this isn't the year to have them. And then the benefits category is primarily health insurance increases, which are negotiated by the state, so we have no control. And then you can see we cut supplies. we cut capital equipment to 0. We have a slight increase in maintenance. Transportation, I believe, is a cut in the number of field trips. And we got a little decrease in energy. I will say, energy, we get our energy from a solar tracker that we won by having the most students participate in Walk to School several years ago, so that's free energy. And then we also pay for the Hartland Dam's energy on Mulls Brook. So we're really proud of our renewable energy participation. And I do think that it helps our energy costs. Go forward. So I want to talk about, we're a K-8 school, but we educate kids from preschool, so age 3 through age 5, and then at age 5 they enter Hartland, so they become kindergartners, and we educate them from kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade, and then we send them off to high school. And we pay tuition to high schools because we do not have a high school in Hartland. So that creates some challenges. Our budget, we have to pay for the kids that are going to preschool, and we're not in control of where they go. We just have to, we send vouchers for the kids that are in preschool. And then the same thing when our kids go to high school. We, again, send a voucher, and we pay. With preschool, we pay for the number of kids, and we pay a set amount. In high school, we pay what the public school is asking and what they've deemed a reasonable price. And then for private schools or religious schools, we pay the state average. And so we have no wiggle room in those numbers. And so through this, there's a lot of places that we don't have wiggle room. Tuition is one of the biggest ones. So when we have nearly a $400,000 increase in our tuition, if we were going to offset that in our K-8 school, we would have to cut 4 teachers. And we can't do that. So you start to see where the things that are outside of our control, if we were to just look at the costs, we would decimate our K-8 program. Okay, so that's high school tuition. So this is all the slides. These are the things that are out of our control. Benefits, and this is a state negotiated healthcare increase. Keep going. Our tuition assessments, again, this is the bulk of this increase is our special education students, and our special education students, the special educator literally looks at every single student. Our director of special education looks at every single student and outlines how many hours per week they need to see their special educator, what programs they need to do. And so those special education costs are like down to the dollar what she thinks each kid needs programmatically. And so that those increases are what our kids need. And they're also done at the supervisory union level. And they're also legally, we can't cut them. Next slide. Our staff negotiated wages are done at the supervisory union level. And they're across the board for all of the schools in the supervisory union. So the only way we can change wages is to cut teachers, to decrease wages. So our the total budget, the increase, and these are, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, these are the increases that are out of our control. So $1 million of our total budget are not things that the Hartland board has any direct control over. And so the things that we do have direct control over are what happens in our K-8 building. And so we have challenges offsetting those increases in 2/3 of what 2/3 of the population that we're educating. Next slide. Okay, so we have an increase of $1 million. So the increase is $1 million of our budget from this year to next year. The total increase that's out of our control is slightly higher than that, and we've offset that by some cuts. And then we've decreased the budgets in areas that we do have control over. So we'll keep going. So for staffing, this current year, we have 33 people, teachers or certified individuals in our building. So the nurse, our administrators, and certified teachers. And next year, we're going to go down to 32. Next slide. And then so I'm also going to talk about what's changed in education. I started to talk about at the beginning, but I want to come back to what's changed in education, maybe since you were there or even since the pandemic. So let me go. So one of the things that's really changed that you may hear about in the news that is a big driver of cost is the mental health of our students. If you have a student that is experiencing poor mental health in your classroom, you may not be able to teach any other kid in that classroom. So you have to address the health of every child in the classroom. Mental health shows up as kids having anxiety that's such bad anxiety that they're hiding under desks. Or sometimes a kid will flip furniture, and these aren't bad kids. This is anxiety, it's mental health, and it impacts all of the kids in our classroom. So we pay for, Lindsay had a list earlier, but we pay for a large number of outside services to come in, and the majority of those provide mental health services to our kids in our building. The goal being that every kid is in the classroom and learning. And then if a kid does have challenges, and we would refer to them as blowing up, that they can have a safe place to go to where we have an individual on staff that can deal with the mental health illness or whatever challenge is hitting them on that day. So that's a big thing that's changed, and I'll say that in elementary school, when I was there, that didn't exist. Like, you almost never saw these challenges. The kids that had real challenges were not in our buildings. And today, they're in our buildings. And I'll also say, I was Googling while Lindsay was talking, Vermont is part of the lawsuit against Meta, the owners of Facebook. Because there's a lot of evidence, especially for our preteens and teens, that social media is causing a lot of these challenges. And I think that nationwide, we're asking our schools to pay for the challenges caused by companies that are making enormous profits. So. There's a lot of increased student need. Prior to providing free meals, we had a lot of kids that weren't learning because they weren't getting enough food. We were having kids come to school that were not eating breakfast, and then a lot of kids were too embarrassed to get the free and reduced lunch, or parents were too embarrassed to fill out the paperwork. And so those kids weren't eating. So Hartland early shifted to a meal program where students would be proud to eat the meals that we serve. We have high quality food. High quality doesn't mean high cost, but we try to source as much of our food as we can locally, and that cuts down on transportation costs and allows us to provide food that kids want to eat. And then the state of Vermont at the same time, or the state of Vermont, probably 2 or 3 years after we made our changes, they decided that all students should have universal meals, so that all kids should eat in schools. And this is because it's a statewide problem. A lot of families don't have enough money to feed their kids high quality meals. We have direct counseling support. I've talked about the mental health challenges. We have direct counseling support every day during school. That doesn't mean every kid is getting counseling every day, but there's a counselor there every day hitting the kids that need the extra help that they need. We have behavioral interventionists that support kids in an immediate need or to help them before they get to the immediate need. Another thing that's changed is that the state of Vermont has increased, and I completely agree with this, but movement is really important to learning, and the state of Vermont has increased the number of physical education classes that students need to take. And so that creates a need for teachers, physical education teachers. We have an increased number of students qualifying for special education services. And a lot of this may be tied to lack of early childhood education. So not getting into high quality daycares, not getting into high quality preschools, and then having to catch up when they get into our schools. We have a significant level of trauma and kids who have experienced trauma. And trauma can be being a child of a single parent whose parent has to work and just isn't there in the house to take care of the kid. And then trauma can also range to some of the more horrible things that you think about when you think about trauma. But the increased level of trauma is substantially higher than any of us in this room pictured when we were in elementary school. And then we, to deal with some of that, we have HCRS. And can you guys remind me what HCRS stands for? It's Healthcare Rehabilitation Services. They are a nonprofit that helps schools and families throughout the Upper Valley and I think the state to deal with mental health supports. And they're an amazing organization, and we're lucky to have them in our school. And they are not as expensive as if we were to hire some other outside counselors, but they do still cost money. Okay, so now we're here to the projected tax rates. So we've produced a budget that's $500,000 lower, and our tax rate is now projected to be 2.3504. So $2.35 for per $1,000 house value, or no, per $100 house value. Thank you. Keep messing that up. And that's a 29% increase from last year, which is terrifying and awful, and you will see why in the next slide. So what you'll see is that without the CLA, the school-based tax rate would actually be lower next year. Our CLA adds a multiplier of 1.44 to our school budget, or to our school projected tax rate, which increases the tax rate by 76 cents. So we can go to the next slide. So this is it in a graph, because I'm an engineer and I think in graphs and I see math visually. So this is the last 5 years. And then the last year is the one that we're projecting. You can see in FY20, our CLA caused our tax rate to decrease. So our houses were worth more than what the state predicted. Our house appraisals were worth more than what the state predicted our houses should be worth. And then the next 2 years, in 21 and 22, we were about dead even, but still slightly, our houses were appraised slightly higher than what the state said that they should be appraised at. In 2023, our housing values started to increase. And so we got an extra tax added on to our school-based tax rate. So we added another 17 cents. In 24, our houses values shot up a little bit more. So we had to add an extra 34 cents. Now we come to next year, 2025, and this slide actually says 73 cents, so I don't know what the difference there is. But so this year we're adding that extra 73 cents on top of what the school-based tax rate would be. So to highlight this graph again, the homestead rate gives schools $1 essentially for every for the state give what? Yeah, for every house. Yeah. And so then we add as each school's budget is developed, they only provide $10,000 per student, which is not anywhere near enough money to educate a student. So every school's budget adds a little bit more on top of that. So that's that green level. And so this year, the school budget tax rate would be $1.62. And then they multiply that by the CLA, which, or they divide it by the CLA. So our CLA is 0.69. If you do the math, that's the same as multiplying it by 1.44, which gives us that extra adder. We can't control that. We have absolutely no control over that. All we can do is propose a budget that meets the needs of our school. And when we chose to cut the $500,000, I referred to it as limp mode. We're going to get through this year. And we really don't feel like we can cut a lot more. And we certainly can't offset that multiplier. So that's out of our control. So Alina, the next slide. So this is how that rate factors out. For a $100,000 house, it would be an increase of $530 a year. I'm going to jump to the $300,000 house, and it would be an increase of $1,900 a year. These are not pretty. I am not happy that I'm going to be paying these. But I also know that the school did the best they could to propose the budget that they did. I know that the school can't cut a lot more. And I know that these rates are a function of the state's formula, and we need to fix the state's formula without harming the school. So that's where I am. Lena, you can go to the next slide. So I suspected that people in the audience might be like, well, maybe you could cut a little bit more. So I did run the numbers. If we were to cut another $500,000 from the budget, we would have to cut another 5 teachers. Again, we're a K-8 school, so there are very few places that we have control. And that would mean that we need to cut all of our, I don't want the arts teachers, so art, music, PE. We would have to cut all of those teachers. If we cut all of those teachers, we do not meet the education quality standards. Those are required. If we chose to cut classroom teachers, we would be cutting teachers that are servicing kids, and we would have classroom sizes that are over 30 kids per classroom. Again, we would not be meeting the education quality standards. So we're, and the final take home for that is that you would still see a 23% increase. We would have gutted the function of the school and your taxes would still be going up 23%. Another way to look at it is that if we were to do that, you would only save $120 a year on a $100,000 house. So that, I hope that drives home where the school is. We don't have the control to cut to offset the CLA. If we, and I don't want this to happen, if we cannot pass a school budget, your taxes are still going to go up by 17%. And we will have to cut 30% of our teaching staff. So we would not have a functional school and your taxes would still get increased by 17%. So that's why I've been asking people to talk to their legislature. This is it's pretty much the same numbers I presented last time we talked. We did what we could do to bring the taxes down, but it still is not a pretty situation. And I'm asking people to vote based on the school budget itself, and hopefully between now and when our tax bills come out, the legislature will have found a way to fix this and lower our tax rates, because this is not a situation that is reasonable to ask of people. So the next slide. So this is just my summary. The school budget decreases taxes this year. Like the budget ourselves is a lower tax rate than what we're experiencing this year. And then we add the CLA, which we just talked about increases it. The school has proactively already decided to cut $500,000 from our budget. Our current tax rate is estimated with that $500,000 cut. Our current tax rate is estimated to be $2.30 per $100 of housing value, which is a 29% increase. If the school were to cut another $500,000, we would not meet the standards, and the tax rate would only decrease by 12 cents. So that is the summary, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt so that he can help me answer questions.
Okay, so if there are questions, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask, I'm going to take this and put it here, and I'm going to ask folks if you can to come up to the center and be able to ask questions. And you can direct it to the board in general, and then we can decide to turn into a back and forth, or just get as much clarity as possible, so we get a little more liberal in how we have the conversation. Full house, how we okay, so those that have
Bruce Renfro. Just a general question. You mentioned in your presentation that the CLA is really responsible for the majority of this issue that we're facing. And you also mentioned that you consider this sort of a limp year. Let's see if we can get through this year. Well, if the CLA continues to increase as it has done over the past few years, and the legislature doesn't do anything, we're back in the same situation next year with even higher increases. Am I understanding that correctly?
Okay. One of the funny games that we're going to play. Right. So the legislature has to fix this. And I actually, one of our legislative representatives was texting me, and literally at 6:47 was texting me one of the proposals that the legislature is coming up with. The legislature recognizes that the CLA, 80% of the state of Vermont's CLA is below their appraised value. The state of Vermont's housing value has skyrocketed. And only the towns that have been reappraised in the last year are the ones that have a reasonable CLA. Hartland is unlucky that we are one of the most recently appraised towns that has such a low CLA. So our housing prices really have skyrocketed since we were last appraised. There is a statewide crisis, or a statewide shortage of appraisers. And so the state is actually looking to hire the appraisers now and help communities bring their appraisals back up to where they are, but it still may be 3 and 4 years before the entire state can be done. I mean, it's 80% of the state that is stuck in this situation. We're lucky that our housing rates went up this high, and unlucky that our housing rates are as high as they are. So the legislature has in previous years talked about the fact that the property tax it's a really regressive tax in that it doesn't account for income. It only accounts for housing value. And so if you've got a really nice house that was passed down from your parents, but you make a very small income, you're going to get taxed based on that really high value house. And that is not a fair tax. And the legislature realizes that, and they are motivated to change it. So I can't imagine that we would be in this exact position next year. And I really think if we keep sending the emails that we can get the legislature to do something to help us this year. So the number that I presented, the $2.35 increase, or not, sorry, not increase, the $2.35 rate, that is the best estimate based on the numbers that the state has crunched at this point. If those 30 schools whose budgets, or those 30 districts whose budgets were not approved, if they choose to cut, the amount of money that's needed at the state level decreases, and that will decrease our tax rate. So that's one way that I hope that we see a decrease. For a lot of the towns with the really, really bad CLAs, like Hartland, we're, I think, 20th in the state of all the towns in the state with the worst CLA. If the legislature hears us, hopefully they can do something to offset that CLA challenge. But they are bringing ideas to the table right now, and I really hope that they find a way to fix this come July. So, and that's another reason that I'm asking voters to vote based on the school budget that we presented, because I do think the tax rate is going to change. I feel like I can almost guarantee that this is the worst case of the tax rate, and it will likely improve by July, but I can't estimate how much the legislature will help us. I also hope that the legislature finds ways to pull money from the general fund and use it for education, because they have been going in the opposite direction for years. And we need, like, the one thing that's written in our Constitution is to educate our kids. And I feel like the state has failed us this year. Next question. Wait, yeah, Hannah.
Member of the public or the board, and thanks for letting me make a little more noise, as if my crew hasn't made enough noise already. So I'm Hannah Benson. I think many of you know I grew up in the Hartland School District and very intentionally moved back to Hartland because of my experience in the school district. I also moved back to Vermont because of the protest vote that Vermonters love. And so one thing I just want to sort of comment on is this idea that voting down the budget will send a message to the state, which I know is an incredibly appealing motion at this time. But I want to just sort of reiterate, I think, the case that Nikki made so well tonight, that the only people that are going to suffer by that protest vote are our kids. I think the state, I hope, has heard the message by the 30% rejected budgets and will hear from us in many other ways, but I really worry that voting down the budget in the town in the next month is only going to result in our kids experiencing significant compromise in their education. So just another plug to ask for a yes vote in the coming weeks.
Other questions or comments?
Marianne Postens. I live in Hartland, and our kids went to the elementary school, and I'm a 31-year educator. The scores, thank you for bringing them this time. So roughly it was like 50% below, 50% above, which is shocking, actually, that it's so low. So I see you are pointing out some improvement. And so what's your plan to improve those scores, and how do those scores compare to Vermont in general? Does Vermont tend to be low like that?
So what we're doing at the supervisory union as well as Hartland Elementary School, a couple important points is that we've implemented 2 new curriculums, which we haven't had in previous years, which we foresee as being something that will allow grade levels and teams of teachers to have common understandings and conversations, with the goal being that every 2nd grade student or every 5th grade student at Hartland Elementary School is receiving the same educational experience. So that's really important to us. And that's newer because our supervisory union didn't have adopted programs. And this is the first year that both of those are being implemented. This assessment that I had shown, the STAR assessment, again, this is the first year that we are using that. We looked to try to find a way to demonstrate versus the state level. It's just a challenge with this particular year because the VT cap scores are embargoed. And then we're going to try to go back and find SBACs, but SBAC is not necessarily the most reliable assessment at this point because it's not one that we're even using anymore. And so where we're at in terms of others in the state, we're not at a point where we can show what that would look like. So I wish I had a better answer to that question, and I'm sorry. Nikki, yeah, you want to add?
I will say that I'm going back to remember my own kids' SBAC results, and Hartland compared to the state was higher than the state, but they pulled the SBAC. I asked Lindsay to go pull them, but they pulled the SBAC scores off of the state website. So the state literally is providing no information for us to present to you right now, which is beyond frustrating. I think I had another thought, but I think it's gone. So, nope, it's gone.
Let me turn it on.
Hi, I'm Marion Comstock, and I haven't lived in Hartland all of my life because I haven't lived that yet, but 61 years of it anyway. So I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, but you said the $500,000 cut was 2 teachers and the playground. Right. So my concern is well, I guess the biggest question I have is the capital reserve funds. So it's my understanding that we have 2 capital reserve funds. Because, forgive me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but there was a capital reserve fund that needed to go to the town to be voted, whether money went in or out of it. And then a few years back, there was a second capital reserve fund for the school. No? Okay. Maybe I misunderstood, but at our previous vote, it was a $75,000 request to take money out for the playground. And this April 2nd, it's a $10,000 request.
Yeah, so if you turn your sorry. Okay. Yes, so what we did in the previous budget, we allocated about 75% of the playground into the standard school budget, and then we took another 25% and put it into the capital reserve. The idea there being that we estimated how much we might be able to come up with in grant funding, and we didn't want to put money that we thought we could raise in grants into the school budget. So we put it into the capital reserve so that we had, if that budget had passed and if we hadn't rescinded it, that we would have all of the money that we needed to make the playground, but that our goal was to raise that capital reserve fund request in grants and never even touch it. So that's that difference. The full playground cost is over $200,000. 260, yeah.
So I think the question is, what is the ask now compared to what it was, or did she answer your question?
That was a little misleading because if you look through the budget, you can't see any quote unquote playground expense, but we could see it in the $75,000 request. But it also says that we have $342,425.79 in our capital reserve fund. So I'm wondering, my main question, it took me a while to get to it, is it possible to use any of that capital reserve money to offset these tax increases?
We have cut all capital objects out of the budget. Yeah, we can't use the money in the capital reserve fund for anything but capital, and it has to be voted on by the taxpayers. So, you know, we could have used it for lockers. We could have used a portion of it for the playground. And we had a big discussion as a board as to whether or not we wanted to pay for the full playground out of the capital reserve, or if we wanted we chose the course that we chose. So the capital reserve is only for capital equipment. And we also do not want to deplete it because we do have capital needs in the future.
So I'll have to do some more investigating because it was my understanding in the past we've been able to use capital reserve funds to offset the school budget. So either this...
Not in the 9.5 years that I've been on the board. Oh, are you talking about the article where we can use capital reserve funds? Okay, yeah, we could use capital reserve funds to borrow. We can borrow from a 6-month standpoint. We can borrow from the capital reserve in order to pay our teachers, and then we need to immediately pay it back, so that the capital reserve isn't changing year over year. We borrow because we only collect taxes twice a year, but we pay our teachers every 2 weeks. We have to have a mechanism to borrow. So maybe, is that what you're thinking?
the capital reserve money come from? Where did that 300 and whatever thousand come from? How, I don't remember ever voting to put money into it.
There, previous boards, and this is before my time, have chosen to take the surplus from, we ask for a certain budget, and then if we spend $100,000 less, previous boards have chosen to put that into the capital reserve fund. And so that's some of the way that it grew. The bulk of the way that it grew, and this is before my time even in Hartland, I've been here for 24 years now, there was an oil spill and the school got a big, or the town got a big bolus of money from the oil spill, and that is what has seeded the bulk of the money in the capital reserve account, which is why we don't want to drain it. What? It wasn't just the town. Okay. Okay, so somebody told me that it was the school. Okay, that was before my time. So it's been from surpluses from previous years.
From what, going way back to my long-term memory, you had to vote, you had to bring it to the town for a vote, whether you put money into that reserve account or took it out. And so what I'm saying is I don't remember there being a lot of votes to put money in. Like, we didn't just find out that we had a surplus and then had another town vote to put that money into the reserve account. So we can talk later. I'm just really confused, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, most of the time one reason that maybe we don't remember is that at least I've been on the board, it's like, I think going on 10 years, I don't even know. We've never put money into the capital reserve because the tax rate has always been increasing thanks to our state formula. And so we've always chosen to use any surplus that we have to buy down taxes for the following year, which we've also done in this budget. We had a surplus last year, and we're choosing it to buy down this year. In a year that the tax rate is really great, we would choose to put it in the capital reserve, and that would be something that was voted on. So.
That one over there.
Bonnie Goodman from Hartland. So you were talking about the CLA and that because we were just reappraised in 2018 or 19, I think, yeah. And you were saying if it was higher, our CLA would be lower? If our appraisal had, if we hadn't been appraised in 2019 and the old appraisal was still in place, our CLA would have been lower? Yeah?
So the CLA is, so our current CLA is 0.69. And what that means is that our housing appraisals are appraised at 69% of what the state thinks that they should be appraised at. If we had not done the 2019 appraisal, we may be as low as like, oh well, 60 or even in the 50s, which would be really horrific. I spent a lot of time emailing back and forth with the Agency of Education's financial director because these numbers just made so little sense to me. The fact that our town would be facing this level of an increase because of our housing value just didn't, I couldn't even wrap my head around it because it didn't make any sense. And I will still argue that it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is the formula, and that's what we're facing. One of the conversations I had with him that I feel like I got a little bit of smoke and mirrors from, and I think, I don't know why, the entire state is, the entire state CLA is off. And so are we raising that much more money? And so I asked him, if the entire state CLA is off, and all of these towns are having their school budgets multiplied by this extra multiplier, to me, that really does seem like we're raising an excessive amount more money than we should be. I said, what happens if that is the case? And it goes back to the taxpayers. So part of me hopes that when all of these budgets roll in, because like I said, the average budget increase across the state was 15%. As all these budgets roll in, hopefully they see the calculations, multiply all those budgets by the CLA for each individual town, and realize that they've raised a lot more than they needed to, and that will bring the tax rate down for everybody. But the way that the CLA is calculated is it's not included in any of those calculations. It's just this multiplier. And I expressed frustration, and it may have even been because the questions I was asking the finance director at the Agency of Education didn't know the answer to. So that, I think that may have been why I was receiving smoke and mirrors, because it's so complicated. I'm not sure anybody knows until all of the numbers are run and everything comes through and we really see how much money the state has projected to raise through these tax rates, through the CLA multiplier, and then how much money the schools actually need, and then it all gets reallocated. I did do a lot of homework. I even tried to get our CLA negated by asking the appraisers to look at it, and I tried to see if we could fight the CLA, and she couldn't find enough to make a case. So.
Point makes sense. If you find evidence that the kind of CLA, the projected increase in value doesn't make sense if you look at comparables, you can challenge the CLA. The problem is, if you've looked at sale prices in Hartland over the last 2 years, and this is over a couple of years, it appears that it's represented that kind of a jump. So.
Jim Riley, first I wanted to say thank you for your work. I know this is a really hard job and a position to be in. I also have a math question. It's not going to be as complicated as the last one. Maybe somebody on the green bar can do it and not the red bar. All right. But my question is really around cost per pupil. What's the cost to educate an elementary school child, and what's the cost to educate a high school child?
High school tuition costs this year range from about 20,000 and change up to almost 27,000 and change. And we have, for our high schools, I would say it's probably in the middle of those two numbers. We send a lot of kids to Hanover. That's one of the more expensive schools, and to Hartford as well. So I would say it's probably in the middle of those 23, 24. At the elementary level, it's dropped because of the new formula, because of the long-term weighted average. Yes. Yes. I can't answer that because we have to use the long-term weighted average to figure that cost out now. So last year, I think Hartland was around 21,000 per pupil, and I want to say you're at 18, but it could be 15, and I'll look to find the actual number. And that is due to the new long-term weighted average formula that's in place, and I can just briefly touch upon that. And that legislation was really to equalize what the cost of education across districts, and districts who have a lot of ELL students. It costs more money to educate an ELL student. It costs more money to educate students. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I've been in education too long. Not really, because I love it. So if you're educating students in rural communities, it costs more money. If you're educating students that are in poverty, it costs more money. So the state came up with this new formula, new weights per students. So all the schools in our supervisory union actually added students, not real students, but added numbers based on the weighting formula. So that did bring our per pupil cost down because we're dividing by more students. But I will get that number for you. Yep.
Marianne Postins. There was an interesting article recently in Vermont Digger about what's happening in Vermont and education. And so I'm wondering if you've thought about, in terms of like sustainability and a decreasing population of young children, of linking with like Windsor under the SAU or to combine the schools to save money.
So, yes, that was done as part of Act 46 years ago. And the town of Hartland chose not to go that way. I think the next thing that's coming down from the legislature is going to be even bigger than Act 46 and force extra huge mergers. So it may be like Windsor, Woodstock, and Hartford all combining together. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about that. But and most of those mixed feelings come from the sixth grader in me that got dumped into a school with more than 300 students per grade and feeling awful. And I really like our K-8 school where our middle schoolers don't get dumped into a building of strangers when they're at their most awkward physically and emotionally. Okay, moving on. So yes, I do think the state is going to require us to look at that. And we will. So we did go through the round of Act 46, which was like a 3-year process, and did a lot of studies and a lot of looking at our communities and some voting. And so we are where we are right now. And if I know anything about the state of education in the state of Vermont, is that the legislature will throw a massive curveball at us every single year and make it really fun, sorry, Ryan, to be a school board member. So we'll wait and see how many curveballs get thrown at us this year, and we'll figure out what to do.
That number, the cost per pupil for next year is $16,358.47 based on the long-term weighted average of 660 students, which you saw earlier. We don't have that many. Right. Yes, that's correct. It's more. I don't think it would be that high, but it would be in the 20s, I'm pretty certain. Yeah.
People are in K-12, K-8 in Hartland. 250. So you can probably, just because they broke out the budgets for K-8 and then the higher ones. So any additional questions? Is there anyone online who has a question? Any additional questions from the audience? Okay. All right. So you do not have a board meeting that follows? You're like the last time? I congratulate you.
I had a question.
You have a, okay. All right. right.
This is a question for John, if you know the answer. Is voting open now? Can people vote absentee ballot in person right now? Oh, right. Well, okay, as the town manager. Okay. I believe it is open for absentee ballot right now. Yes, so you can vote tomorrow. I'm encouraging everyone to please vote and approve our budget for our kids' sake. So that's it.
Okay. And I don't think we need a motion to adjourn because it's an informational meeting, so we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.